Welcome in to another edition of This Week in UNC Baseball. I am Tommy Ashley. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. That is Grace Nugent. In the middle, Coach Jesse Wierzbicki, North Carolina hitting coach, assistant coach, infield, and catchers. Coach Wierzbicki, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We are wonderful. It's always fun to talk to somebody other than Coach Forbes. Forbes is great to join us every week, but since it was an off week, we wanted to get you on here and just talk about your role and also the production that your guys are getting. But first, I want to go back to when you played at Carolina and ask a question that I think is interesting, at least to me, is how different is it from playing at Carolina to coaching at Carolina? Especially, it's only been, 15 years,
Yeah.
but it seems like the college landscape has changed so much. How big a difference is it for you?
It's something that when I was playing, I never envisioned myself coaching. That was not, kind of a part of my plan. I wanted to play baseball as long as I possibly could, and was fortunate to get a chance to play after Carolina. But I never really thought about coaching until I came back and finished my degree. And Coach Fox asked me to help, be a student assistant while I finished my degree. And in that time, just kind of felt and fell in love with coaching and being around this coaching staff. It wasn't hard to do. I mean, it was just one of those things where you look up and you're like, how have I gotten here? And it's pretty neat because Coach Forbes, when he recruited me, he was the pitching coach and I was a catcher. He brought me in as a catcher. And when I came back to Carolina and officially was the volunteer coach in 2017, Coach Forbes was doing the offense. So me and him did the offense together. So I've got a chance to work with Coach Forbes, on both sides of the ball, the defensive part and obviously the offensive part. So, but from a player to a coach, I never thought I would be a coach, and then it just kind of fell into my lap and I fell in love with coaching. I still get to put on a uniform and, just very blessed to be where I'm at.
So when you go from that player to coach role, and as a coach, are there times where you might get on one of your guys or have to correct one of your guys or coach them up or whatever and think about how it was handled when you were that player, especially since you were at Carolina as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I try to always, it's I think it gets more difficult the older you get, but, I'm not too far out of it to where I can't remember how it felt to be coached. And, I try to do things that I liked other coaches when they, just how they coached me. I try to emulate those types of things. And then the coaches that, maybe I didn't get along with so well, or maybe I didn't, just agree with what they were saying. I try to, gear my coaching towards the things that helped me. And, it's difficult though, because every player's different. I was, if I look back on me as a player, I was probably pretty easy to coach because I wore my emotions on my sleeve. So you could always tell what I was thinking and whether or not I was upset. You could visibly probably see it as a coach. Whereas, you coach guys and it's just not this. It's not the same with every player. The longer you do it, the more you have to understand. Every player's a little bit different, and some guys might take this and some guys might take that, and you got to just kind of get to know the player the best you can and have a relationship with them. And the better you do that, probably the better it's going to go from a coaching standpoint.
Coach Forbes talks a lot about some of his coaching icons. Nick Saban has been brought up so many times with us, and I bet with you as well. What are some of the coaches that you try to emulate, and how do you see that affect your hitters?
I wouldn't say there's anybody in particular. I mean, it's hard not to just Coach Forbes. He brings up whether it's Coach Saban or I mean, he's brought up Coach Belichick a few times. There's many different coaches that he kind of brings up and uses examples from in the past. But I don't think there's any one particular. I think I grab pieces from a bunch of different coaches and try to do things that basically would emulate those coaches, but I wouldn't say there's one in particular coach that I just is my idol or something like that. I would say I idolized players when I was growing up. I never thought about coaches, which is probably why I never thought about being a coach. I always wanted to be a player. I grew up just south of Atlanta, and the Atlanta Braves were really good when I was growing up. So like Chipper Jones and Javi Lopez and those guys back in the day, those were my idols. I did it's hard not to notice Bobby Cox when you're growing up watching the Atlanta Braves, and I'd always read articles and stuff about how the players they respected him because of just what a player coach he was. He demanded a lot of respect, but if you played hard and you kind of kept your mouth shut and did what you're supposed to do, he was always going to fight for you. So I kind of keep that in the back of my mind. So I guess if there was one, maybe Bobby Cox.
When you talk about, coaching different players differently, we've talked, I think in particular, both Gavin and Jackson brought up the swing adjustments that you kind of helped them make either at the beginning of the season or during the season to get them where they are now. Gavin is just hitting the baseball miles out of the park, and Jackson has really, changed from last year to this year. But how do you go about making those individual adjustments either before a season or during a season with players that A, have different swings, and B, have different playing and coaching styles?
Yeah, so Gavin, he's been here now 2 years. I watched him play in high school. When you're recruiting these kids, especially if he's a high school player, you're obviously not coaching them when they're in high school, but you're watching them a lot. And so I knew he was a good athlete. I knew he played, pretty much everywhere on the infield. He was just a baseball player. And I got to watch him a lot in high school. So when he got here, I feel like our relationship was probably a little bit different than mine and Jackson Vanderbreak's, just because Vanderbrake was a junior college player, from the other side of the country. But Gavin, he's a very just neutral. He's never really up, he's never really down, which I really, really respect. If I could have been more like that as a player, I think it would have helped me. But the swing adjustments that we've made during the season, it's just you kind of see how pitchers are pitching certain hitters like a Gavin, and you figure out, okay, well, like here's balls that you're getting to well, and here's the balls that you're not getting to, and whether it's the swing decisions or his actual swing, I usually always try to start with, are you making good decisions? Are you swinging at good pitches? And we'll start there. And if we're doing that and we're still not hitting the ball, then there's probably some little minor tweak we need to make mechanically. And for most players, it's not a very big thing. It's not a very big adjustment. Like if you were to tell from the stands, you might not be able to notice it. A lot of it probably has to do with like how they set up in the box. And that's kind of where we started with both of those guys, was their setup had changed a little bit than it did from the fall or from the times that they've done really well. When they were swinging it well, their setups had changed a little bit. So we kind of went back and looked at how they were doing when they were swinging the bat well, and then looked at them now, and okay, we can set up. Let's try to set up how we were doing before. And Jackson, he's very similar. It's just I didn't have a chance to watch Jackson for as long. So when he got here, he's kind of set in his how he does certain things. He's an older player. He's a very strong kid. He's gotten a lot stronger since he's been here. And I think anytime you add some strength and some size, it kind of changes how your body moves. So we've had to adjust while he's been here in terms of, he's gotten bigger and stronger. It's gonna do some things when he gets in the box. It can be a really, really good thing, but it also can be a bad thing if you're not careful and you're not noticing certain things. So, I'll give those guys credit, because swing adjustments and changes during a season, a lot of times players are very reluctant to do just because they don't want to mess with anything. But those guys are always trying to get better. So, them willing and being humble enough to say, okay, this is what I have to do. And, whether it's uncomfortable or not, like I've got to get better. And in order to get better, sometimes you got to get uncomfortable. And those guys have both done that. And I think they're reaping the benefits from it.
Talking with assistant coach Jesse Wierzbicki of North Carolina Tar Heels on This Week in UNC Baseball. Coach Wiers, listening to you talk there, it sort of reminds me of a conversation we had with Coach Forbes, and we've talked with Coach Forbes about it, is all of these guys these days are getting coaching from so many different places. They have their own personal trainers, personal hitting coaches, whatever. How, as a college coach, and you get these guys in, does it make it more difficult to coach them and to get them to do the things that you want them to do, or that you feel the need for them to do, when there are so many other outside influences, like maybe never was in the past, or if it was maybe one person? How do you deal with that? And I'm not just in one specific player, but just in general this day and age, because it seems like everybody's got their guys, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. No, I think where we try to start is, number one, I try to explain to the player, and I'll sit them down, when they get here in the fall, like I know everyone's got their own guys, and those guys have helped you get to this point. So the last thing that I'm trying to do is pull you away from those guys. But I try to get them to understand we're here with you every single day. We see the good, the bad, all of the in between. And, you guys have to understand that, because when you go back to wherever you're from, they're only getting you for a very small window of time. And they're usually getting you in the batting cage where the situation or the environment isn't a game. You're hitting off of a coach or you're hitting off of a machine. You're not watching your players off of live arms. And, here we're obviously watching them do everything. Not to mention we're watching them in the weight room. We're watching them how they stretch, how they move. So there's a lot more information that we can gather because they're here with us more. But I think I try to make the player understand or get the player to understand, as long as we're on the same page, as long as our fundamentals, our common denominators are the same, then I have absolutely zero issue with you guys going home or going back to wherever you're from and working with your guys, as long as it's not, complete opposite of what we're trying to teach you here. And I think the players get it. We give them, I think when a player leaves here, they understand, okay, what's important. And, we talk a lot about timing, and we talk a lot about balance, and we talk a lot about our bat paths. So we kind of do it our certain way, but a lot of times, a player or a hitter, he's going to hear one thing from one coach, and he's going to hear the same thing from another coach, but maybe he says it in a different way, or he can relate it better. And I'm just all for the player getting better and improving so they can help us, reach our goals as a team. So I haven't had any, like friction or anything like that with guys in the past. But I think it's because they understand what we're trying to do. And when they go home, they kind of relay that to their coaches.
When you can point at the guys you've coached, I mean, Zarate, Vance Honeycutt, your bio lists a ton of the guys that have come through since you've been doing this. How important is that for you personally to have the backing of, hey, look at these guys. They listened.
Right.
And they've had a lot of success. Because the way I run into teenagers in early 20s is they got to see it.
Correct.
You can talk all you want. They got to see the success, and you've had that success. How do you implement or use those successes to sort of push the idea that what you just mentioned, we're here and we're getting you better, and you're going to get better if you'll listen?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. Like you said, for them to be able to flick on the TV and see Michael Bush or, some of these guys that are in the major leagues, that they've been here and they were here pretty recently. He's probably the biggest one right now. He's hitting in the cleanup spot for the Chicago Cubs, and he was here, and played in 2018, went to the World Series and, the Super Regional in 19. And as a freshman, Michael Bush, he wasn't an everyday player for us. So it helps to use those guys, because I think it helps the younger players to understand, okay, well, there's been guys here that are really, really good and they're playing, at the next level, and they had to do the same thing that, Coach Wierzbicki's asking me to do now. And that's kind of, swallow my pride a little bit. And sometimes I've got to make that, swing adjustment or that change that, it's going to be uncomfortable, but, there's a reason why we're asking you to do it, and, Vance Honeycutt, he was a very most talented, obviously, player I've ever been around. But he was a kid that he was so humble when it came to making those adjustments and understanding why he needed to make them. Most kids who are that talented, probably aren't going to make those adjustments just because of who they are. And, I reference Vance just because he was a player that, the swing adjustments we've made with him while he was here, they were pretty, pronounced. And there were some big adjustments that we made with him. And he, to his credit, he wanted to do them and he was all for it. And I think it, helped him while he was here.
When you go about making either large adjustments or small adjustments, do you use analytics? Are you showing them film? Are you just really doing, whatever bio stuff in the cages? Or how do you go about figuring out, okay, this is the problem spot, this is how we fix it, and this is how you implement it in practice into your swing?
Yeah, I think we use video and analytics. We use both of them. I think what I try to do is give the player evidence. This isn't my opinion. These are facts. Whether it's, you're swinging at bad pitches, here are the pitches that you're swinging at, and here's proof of the pitches that you're swinging at, or, video obviously isn't going to lie, hey, you're flying open, or, hey, your setup looks different. And, if you say it to them in the cage and they don't quite, buy into it or listen, I think that's where those pieces of information, the video and the analytics, can really, really help you as a coach, because it's taking my opinion out of it. I had a lot of coaches back in the day say, hey, I think you should do this. And I always challenge our players, you're responsible for your career. So if I'm asking you to do something and you don't understand, it's your responsibility to tell me that. So then I can maybe explain it to you in a different way, or give you some background information, or give you some cold hard facts to get you to make this adjustment. Because, if I'm a player and I hear, hey, I think you need to do this, as good as these players are, I would be asking the same thing. Why? I need to understand why I need to do this. Otherwise, I'm not going to probably want to make that change. So I think that's where the video and the analytics really help, because it gives you some facts, and it takes my opinion out of the equation.
I know, scouts a lot of times will talk about the eye on a player. You have Luke, who's now third in the country in walks with 51. And then you have some guys where you talk about, are you making good decisions on good pitches? How do you kind of help or coach guys that might not have come in with that exact eye and pitch recognition set of some of the other kids?
I think guys who have a really good eye, they have something in common, and that's they're on time for the fastball. And I think a lot of times kids who are swinging at bad pitches, it's as simply as they're just not on time for the fastball. So if you're not on time for the guy's best fastball, then usually what happens is your body will speed up to try to catch up and make up for some lost time. But anytime your body speeds up, you're going to be moving quicker than you need to be. And when you're moving fast, your eyes are moving fast, and you're probably not seeing the ball as well as you could. When guys are seeing the ball well and making good decisions, there's a certain flow, there's a certain rhythm. It's usually really, really slow, and it's usually really, really early in terms of their timing. So, I can use video to show them that. We've got cameras everywhere, so I can show them, hey, this is when you make your first move, and here's where the pitcher's at. So they can actually see it. And then we just work on it every day when we're in the cage. Anytime we're taking batting practice in the batting cage, whether it be off of a machine or off of an arm, we're always, stressing swinging at basically the heart of the plate. And we've got a way to do that in the cage. And but basically, we're only as good as the pitches we're swinging at, and that's something that's stressed every single day, regardless of whatever we're doing in the cage. Like, we're trying to make good decisions. So hopefully, the more and more we do that in practice, we get into the games and we continue to do that, or we do it better than we would if we hadn't been, stressing it.
What's the toughest, I guess, hole in a swing to fix? Is it, I just can't hit high and away? I can't see the spin. What is the toughest thing for a hitting coach to fix on a guy that is talented, that's had success, but maybe is struggling or just has that weakness in there that good pitchers and good teams are able to exploit?
Well, I say this to our guys all the time. Like, if you can't hit a fastball, then you're going to struggle. If you can't cover like middle to middle away, because pitchers at our level, pitchers at the next level, like, they pitch inside, but they're not comfortable doing it. And with certain pitchers, they're not going to pitch inside. So I tell our guys, like, if there's going to be a hole in your swing, I would rather it be inside, because the majority of the pitches that you're going to get are probably going to be the middle of the plate or to the outer portion of the plate. So if we can cover that, pitch, then we've got a chance. But I would say if a guy is struggling with a middle away fastball, then he's going to have a hard time hitting at this level, and that's going to be we're going to have to really put in some work to try to get him to be able to cover that pitch. But that's a pitch that if you can't cover, then it's pretty easy for the pitcher to get you out, because every pitcher can throw the ball middle away.
Yeah, absolutely. And these days, it seems like everybody's throwing that pitch at 95, 96 miles an hour.
Exactly.
When you have a lefty, like Hunter Stokely, he talked to us before and he said, I used to try to yank everything and pull everything. Why does it seem like, and in my limited coaching ability, it was the same way with lefties. Why does it seem like the left center gap is so hard for lefties to want to go to, but you can live there and you can make a ton of money? Why does everybody want to pull the baseball these days, Jesse?
I think everybody's seeing the ball. Everybody wants to leave the yard and hit the ball over the fence. And, I think they think the easiest way to do that is to try to pull it. And I think anytime you get ready to hit and you see the ball really well and it's coming in and it's looking like a beach ball, like your natural reaction is just to try to yank that thing pull side. And what I try to get our guys to understand is, like, if we're trying to stay in the middle of the field and we're trying to hit the batter's eye and a guy makes a mistake middle in, like, you're going to just react. But if we're trying to yank every ball that we see or every ball that we get, all a pitcher's got to do is throw something off speed or throw something away. And if we do hit it, we're probably going to roll over it or, pop it up. So just giving our guys the best chance of squaring up a baseball and getting them to understand, if we try to stay in the middle, then we're going to have a chance, on the ball away, or if the guy does make a mistake middle in, your quickness it'll just happen, But I haven't met many hitters who get in the box and try to hit home runs and actually do it, and I'll say that to our guys all the time. Like, show me a hitter that his approach is to try to hit the ball pull side in the air and hit it out of the yard, and I bet that guy strikes out a lot.
I know you guys have hitters meetings before every game. Last year, you faced pitchers like Chase Burns. This year, you're going to have Jamie Arnold coming up. How do you scout opposing pitchers? And then how do you disseminate that information to your players so they have it in their back of their minds, they know what to look for, but not so much that it's kind of clouding their judgment when they're actually at the plate?
Yeah, that's a great question, Grace, because I think it's really easy there's so much information that we can get, on a Jamie Arnold. I can get every piece of information that there is out there. But if I give all that information to our hitters, I'm probably gonna hold them back a little bit, because at the end of the day, when you get in the box, you have to have a clear mind, and you have to be just, you got to be reacting, and the best way to be reacting is to be relaxed and have one goal. And I think the more information you give certain guys, it prohibits them from doing that. But we used to show a lot of video of certain pitchers. If a guy had something just unusual, we would show them. I don't do that as much because I felt like it would really get our guys thinking a lot before the game and thinking about, maybe what the guy's throwing or what's this guy going to look like, instead of just trusting their preparation and what we work on every day. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who's on the mound. The guy's going to be throwing, whether he's left-handed or right-handed, he's going to have a fastball. He's probably going to have an off-speed pitch. So, even though they're different, they're a lot in the same. So I try to just keep it simple for our players. And, obviously I'm giving them, the velocities of the pitcher. I'm giving him, basically how the pitcher is going to try to attack him. Is he going to pitch to the inside part of the play? Is he going to throw the ball away? What's he comfortable doing? What's he uncomfortable doing? And we'll try to go from there. What's your strength as a hitter? The last thing I want to do is take away our strengths for our hitters. So even though the pitcher, he's got his strengths, like, let's focus on our strengths. I think a lot of times you can focus so much on the pitcher that you forget what you do well as a hitter. So we try to start with what we do well first as hitters.
How do you do that for different hitters with different strengths in your lineup? Are you telling Alex Madera and Kane Kepley the same things that you would be telling Hunter or Luke or Tyson?
No.
And how do you change that depending just on what that pitcher offers?
Well, I know the strengths and weaknesses of our hitters. I know I also know like what type of hitters they are. Like an Alex Madera and a Hunter Stokely, they're both left-handed, but they're two completely different types of hitters. One guy's, a pesky little out with some speed and he can bunt, and he's probably going to move the baseball. He's probably going to put the ball in play. And then Hunter Stokely, obviously there's not a lot of speed there, but there's a lot of power. But what I'm getting those guys to try to prepare for and how I'm talking to them in the game is going to be a little bit different, because I think the pitcher is going to pitch those guys differently. I think with an Alex Madera, teams are just going to attack him, and because he doesn't have a lot of power. So the last thing they want to do with an Alex Madera is walk him. So how they're going to approach Alex Madera is going to be a little bit different than Hunter Stokely, and all of that's going to change if there's guys on base. So hey, this is what's going to happen, Hunter. If there's runners on first and second, like, you're probably going to get, the guy's best off-speed pitch. So just things like that, but definitely not the same. And I think it's just knowing who your players are, and then knowing, like I said before, what the pitcher's strengths are. And I mentioned it earlier, not a lot of guys like to throw inside. So with certain pitchers, we'll get all over the plate. With certain pitchers, we'll back off the plate. With certain pitchers, we'll move up in the box, and we'll be in the back of the box. So it'll change based on who's on the mound and who's in the box.
I mean, with who's in the box, have you seen pitchers, especially with Luke and Gavin, who kind of made their names known last year, have you seen pitchers pitch them differently this year? And if so, how have you been prepping them for that adjustment, where last year they might have been a little bit more protected by the Vances, the Casey Cooks, and the Parks Harbors, but now they're the guys in the lineup that the pitchers are really looking at, like, hey, we need to pitch either around this guy or in specific ways that they might not have had last year?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because they are getting pitched a lot differently. It's easy to hide when you're at the bottom of the lineup. When you're in the middle of the lineup, every opposing team is going to be focused on you. And for like a Gavin, he really did well last year, but he covered just the inner half of the plate. Like he's really good at the balls in, but like anything away, he would struggle with. So we've had to adjust this year, because obviously teams coming into this year are going to realize where he hit the ball well last year. And there's a lot of information, and data on him now after last year that, you're going to be crazy if you try to throw him, where he's really hitting the ball well. You're going to try to throw it to parts of the plate where he's not getting to as well. So we tried to cover a bigger portion of the plate with Gavin, specifically being able to cover the ball away better than he did last year. And I think that's really helped him. And Luke, I think everybody, even last year, knew who Luke was and knew he was dangerous. And this year it's more, not so much him being able to cover the zone better, but him just being able to be more consistent with what he's trying to do and the approach that he's trying to have. I think last year, being a freshman, you kind of just do what worked for you when you were in high school, and the game's so much different at this level. And I think he kind of realized that by trial and error last year, or maybe the hard way. He got dominated at some times, but I think Luke's a really smart hitter, and he understands how pitchers are trying to get him out. And this year, I think it's really helped him, even though, if you asked him, he'd like to be doing a little bit better. I think there's portions of his game this year that are much better than last year, just because he went a whole year in the ACC and saw how they pitched to a Vance and saw how they pitched to a Parks Harbor. So he's very, observant, and he understands how pitchers are trying to get him out.
Talking with assistant coach Jesse Wierzbicki. I know we said 30 minutes, but I've got a couple more.
Okay, that's fine.
We could do this forever. I want you to explain why batting average is overrated. Coach Forbes says it all the time, but yet people that watch the game say, oh, so-and-so's hitting 220 and they stink and all that. Just make it plain to our viewers and listeners and all that, why batting average to you guys is overrated, as looking at it as the main thing for hitters.
Because it doesn't paint the picture of like how good you are as a hitter. It's, if you get to first base by a single or if you get to first base by a walk, it's the same thing. You're going to score the same amount of runs if you get to first base by a single or a walk. So what we try to get our hitters to understand is it doesn't matter how you get there. Obviously, we want to try to we're not going to the batter's box to try to walk, but walks are a good thing because you're getting to first base. The number that we look at is OPS. On base percentage plus your slugging. I think that's the true stat that tells you a lot about a hitter, and it's got nothing to do with hits. It does have everything to do with how often he gets on base, so how many walks is he taking, and then when he does hit it, what kind of damage is he doing? A guy who could be hitting 300, but all he hits is singles. Well, how many runs are you going to score with that guy compared to a guy who hits 250, but every ball he hits is an extra base hit, and he's still walking and got an on-base percentage as high as the guy that's hitting 300. So, hits are hard to get. So we try to get in that box, and we're trying to do damage. And if we don't get the pitch that we're looking for, if that pitch isn't something good we should swing at, we're trying to take it so we can take our walks. And, since I've been here, I feel like we've done a pretty good job with that. Obviously certain guys are better than others. But our job as an offense is to score as many runs as possible, so batting average, that it doesn't correlate necessarily to how many runs you're scoring. If you hit 2 singles in an inning, you might not score a run, but if you hit 1 homer, you're going to score a run. Or if you have a walk and Kane Kepley walks and steals second base and we hit a single, now there's one hit and we scored a run. So I just try to get our guys to understand, like, we're just trying to score as many runs as possible, so the number that you constantly need to be checking on, or if you're going to check on a number, it's your OPS, because that's going to tell you a lot more about the hitter than just his batting average.
Yeah, to your point. Yeah, 100%. Because to your point, Madera's batting .335 right now. His OPS is shade over 800. Luke's batting .280, and his OPS is over 1,000. So
right,
that is that's what I try to get people to see, is like quality at bats and all that stuff. It's not just about the batting average that everybody's infatuated with sometimes these days. One more question for me, and then Grace has got a couple more. We'll let you go. Biggest success story that you've coached at Carolina, a guy that has come in and maybe he's a slappy hitter, and he's that guy, and you turned him into, or you helped mold him into more than that, or somebody that really impressed you with their work ethic, and then it paid off on the field. If you can pull one or maybe two in your 10 years at Carolina.
The two that stick out to me, number one is Angel Zarate. Angel Zarate was a left-handed hitting outfielder for us. He's from the state of North Carolina, not far from here. He didn't play at all his freshman year. He didn't play at all his sophomore year. In fact, he was told, by our coaching staff, like, we don't know if you can play here, and if you want to ensure that you're going to play, you might need to go somewhere else and play, just because he was behind so many different players. But he's just a kid that sticks out to me because of his work ethic, his competitiveness, his willing to listen and be coached, and just his attitude throughout the time he was here. He was a player that I enjoyed seeing every single day, no matter if he was his freshman year not playing or his fifth year and he's our everyday guy, in the outfield. He just sticks out because he turned himself into a really, really good player. And he didn't give up, and he kept working. And, I think he led the ACC in hits his last year here. So just an incredible story of a kid who, a lot of kids would have left, because he hadn't played in 2 years here. And he stuck around and he proved us all wrong. And, he's just a guy that I have a soft spot for because of how much I love being around him and what a good player he turned out to be. And the other one I would say is Ike Freeman. And Ike sticks out to me just because he was such a bad hitter his freshman year. We knew he could defend, and his freshman year he was not good, and he didn't play a whole lot. And I just remember being in the cage with him, and he would get pretty upset. He got pretty upset with me one day because I just told him, I said, dude, if you ever want to play here, if you ever want to hit here, like, you're gonna have to change, because how you hit it's never gonna play at this level. And I don't think he wanted to hear that at the time, but I think if you asked him today, it was probably one of the better things that he's heard, because from that point on, he went to work, and I think he had a mission to, hey, I'm gonna prove you wrong, but in a good way, because we had a great relationship, and he was a kid that really, really helped us get to Omaha in 2018, and he was a heck of a player in 19. He turned into just like an RBI machine for us. But if you'd asked me after his freshman year if he were going to play shortstop and lead us to Omaha, I would have told you were crazy. But he did, and once again, just a fun kid to be around. A kid from North Carolina, and just a kid that I'm proud of because he worked his tail off to accomplish what he did.
I got a short, fun one for you. Are there any swings in the majors or in college baseball that just are your favorite?
I really like I'm a Braves fan. I told you that. I really like Austin Riley swing, the third baseman for the Braves. I'm a huge, not necessarily a swing, but I just like Matt Olson. I think he is incredible, but my favorite is probably Freddie Freeman. He's just hit for the longest time, and he, obviously he was a Braves. He helped us win a World Series, but he's just a guy that he's just been consistent for so long. And I remember him coming up with Atlanta, and I think he's just a good blend of, like, he's got some power, but he's just a pure hitter. He always is at the top in terms of OPS pretty much every single year. He's in the top 10, and I just like watching him hit. At the college level, trying to think, this year or years past?
Whichever.
Wherever.
Okay. I'm trying to think of one that just stands out. I mean, Nick Kurtz was pretty good. I remember watching him as a freshman here, and we played him in a weekend series, and I had no idea who he was until that weekend, and he just went off for 3 games. We couldn't get him out, and just an unbelievable eye. I don't think I ever saw him swinging a ball, and if you threw it over the plate, he was going to smack it. And he's a big dude, and normally guys that big and that strong, they don't have that kind of eye and that kind of approach. And he had just an unbelievable eye and obviously an incredible approach. And, what did he play, like 30 games in the minor leagues, and now he's already in the bigs. So, he's pretty good hitter.
Yeah. A terror. He was the guy. That's a guy you game planned around.
Yes.
Last question. Is it true that you would win a golf foursome, you would win easily, and also win the home run derby between your coaching staff?
Golf is not a question. Coach Jackson, he's pretty good, but I think I can take them all in golf. Now, home run derby, I think Coach Gaines would give me a run for my money because he's a big dude, and if you throw it middle in, I think he's going to hit it out.
That's awesome. It's Coach Forbes said he would bring, I don't know if he said he'd bring up the rear, but he would not be first or second in those contests. But maybe for charity one day you guys can get that done.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Man, it's always a pleasure to talk Carolina baseball, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with Grace and I. It's been fun. I hope it's been fun for you as it has been for us, Jesse.
No, it's been great. There were great questions, and thank you all for having me on here. And go Heels.
Yep, Carolina Campbell Tuesday night, and Carolina NC State Thursday, Friday, and Sunday in Boshamer Stadium. That's Coach Jesse Wierzbicki. That's Grace Nugent. I'm Tommy Ashley, and that's special thanks to Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com, always sponsors of the Inside Carolina podcast and great friends of Inside Carolina subscribers. That means you. They are locally owned and operated, alums, everything you could want from a Carolina business. They're on Franklin Street, on East Franklin Street. Go see them in person. Tell them Inside Carolina sent you. Give them the code and get 10% off your order. If you can't make it to Franklin Street this weekend, graduations in town or graduations this weekend, North Carolina State on the baseball fields in town, a lot going on in Chapel Hill. If you can't get by there, go see them at JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Get the same great customer service, the same great swag, Carolina, everything you could possibly want as a North Carolina fan, you can get from Johnny T-Shirt or JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Tell them we sent you, give them the code, 10% off your order.